Jake never thought that a simple anniversary lunch for his wife Ava would change their lives forever. When he arrived at the restaurant, he found Ava, who was very pregnant, waiting outside in the hot sun. Her eyes showed both strength and worry. Jake rushed to her side, feeling frustrated and concerned. He had no idea that this unfair moment would start a series of events that would change everything. What truth is hidden behind this encounter, and how will it change their lives? Stay tuned to follow their journey of love, courage, and standing up for what's right. Let us know where you are watching from and if this story means something to you. Don't forget to subscribe for more. The sun shone brightly in the clear blue sky, making everything warm. Ava looked out the window of the shiny black car, gently resting her hand on her big belly. At 8 months pregnant, every movement was careful, but today was special. It was their 5th wedding anniversary, and Jake had planned something wonderful. "We're almost there, ma'am," the driver said, catching Ava's eye in the mirror. "Just around this bend." Ava nodded, feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness in her chest. She hadn't been out in weeks because her doctor said her pregnancy was high risk, but she was tired of staying home, so Jake insisted on celebrating with a lunch she would never forget. As the car turned the corner, a beautiful view appeared. At the top of a hill, overlooking a green valley, stood a fancy stone building. Its shiny windows reflected the lovely landscape. "The Hilltop Haven," Ava murmured, recognizing the exclusive restaurant she had seen in magazines. It was famous for being private and quiet, a favorite among celebrities who wanted to escape the busy world. The car stopped, and a valet hurried to open Ava's door. She took a deep breath, preparing for the short walk inside. Her doctor had warned her not to walk too much, but a few steps should be okay. "Welcome to the Hilltop Haven, ma'am," the valet said, offering his hand. "Would you like some help?" Ava smiled and accepted his help. "Thank you, that would be lovely." As she stepped out of the car, Ava felt a little self-conscious. Her maternity dress, though nice, felt different from the fancy clothes of the other guests. She pushed the thought away, reminding herself that she deserved to celebrate this special day with her husband. "Your husband asked me to tell you that he's running a few minutes late," the driver said, handing Ava a small gift box. "He said to go ahead inside and he'll join you soon." Ava nodded, holding the box to her chest. It was just like Jake to have a surprise for her. "Thank you for the ride," she said, giving the driver a generous tip as she walked to the entrance. As Ava looked around, she admired the restaurant's beauty. Lush gardens surrounded the building with hidden spots for quiet conversations. No wonder it was so popular with those who wanted privacy. At the entrance, Ava saw a tall blonde woman coming towards her. The woman wore a crisp white blouse and a perfectly pressed black skirt, looking very official. Her heels clicked sharply on the polished floor, echoing in the fancy foyer. "Good afternoon," the woman said in a sharp voice. "I'm Lucy, the head hostess. How may I help you today?" With a warm smile, Ava replied, "Hello, Lucy. I'm Ava Thompson. I believe my husband made a reservation for us today. It's our anniversary." Lucy's pale blue eyes scanned Ava from head to toe, stopping for a moment on her pregnant belly before returning to her face. Her expression was neutral, but something in her gaze made Ava feel uneasy. "I see," Lucy said, her tone becoming colder. "Under what name is the reservation?" "It should be under Jake Thompson," Ava answered, trying to keep her voice steady. "He made it weeks ago for our 5th anniversary lunch." Lucy turned to her sleek tablet, tapping the screen with her manicured fingers. After a moment, she looked up, her lips pressed into a thin line. "I'm afraid I don't see any reservation under that name. Are you sure it's for today?" Ava nodded vigorously. "Yes, I'm positive. Jake has been planning this for weeks. He even arranged for a car service to bring me here." Lucy replied, her voice patronizing, "I'm sorry, but we're fully booked today. Without a reservation, I can't seat you." Ava felt her heart sink. This couldn't be happening, not today. There must be some mistake, she pleaded. Could you please check again? Maybe it's under my name instead, Ava Thompson. Lucy typed on her tablet again, but her expression didn't change. No, I'm sorry. There's no reservation under either name. But my husband should be here any minute, Ava said, her voice trembling. He's probably just running late. Couldn't we wait inside? It's so hot out here, and my doctor said I should avoid overheating. Lucy glanced briefly at Ava's belly, then back at her face. Her expression hardened. I understand you're expecting, ma'am, but I can't make an exception. We have strict policies. Without a confirmed reservation, I'll have to ask you to wait outside. Ava felt embarrassed, aware of the curious looks from other guests. Please, she said softly. I don't mind waiting, but couldn't I just sit in the lobby? It's so hot, and it's hard for me to stand. Lucy smiled a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. I'm sorry, but our lobby is reserved for guests with confirmed reservations. We have certain standards to maintain. I'm sure you understand. The implication hung in the air, unspoken but clear. Ava didn't meet those standards. She felt her cheeks burn with shame and anger. What do you mean by standards? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Lucy's smile tightened. The Hilltop Haven caters to a certain clientele, Mrs. Skinner Thompson. We pride ourselves on providing an exclusive atmosphere. I'm sure there are other places that might be more suitable for you. Ava opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. She was stunned by the unfairness and prejudice in Lucy's words. Just then, a commotion at the door caught her attention. A group of well-dressed men and women entered the foyer, their laughter echoing off the high ceilings. They looked perfect, wearing expensive jewelry and fancy clothes. Lucy's demeanor changed immediately. Her cool professionalism vanished, replaced by warm excitement. Mr. and Mrs. Cartwright, she exclaimed, quickly moving to greet the newcomers. How nice to see you again. Your usual table is ready, of course. Ava watched in shock as Lucy brought a group inside, completely ignoring her. The difference was clear and painful. These rich people were welcomed with smiles, while Ava, who was tired, pregnant, and upset, stood alone, feeling left out. When Lucy came back, her face was cold. As you can see, Mrs. Thompson, we are very busy today. I must insist that you wait outside for your husband. Maybe you could take a walk in the gardens. Tears started to fill Ava's eyes, but she blinked them back, not wanting to cry in front of Lucy. I understand, she said softly. I'll wait outside. As she turned to leave, Ava saw her reflection in a big mirror. Her dark skin stood out against the light-colored surroundings. Her pregnant belly, which she had always loved, now felt like a badge of shame in this place that didn't seem to accept her. Outside, the sun was hot, and Ava found a small bench near the entrance. She sat down carefully, her back aching and her feet swelling in the heat. She tried to call Jake, but her phone was dead. A wave of helplessness washed over her. From her seat, Ava could see the restaurant entrance. She watched guest after guest arrive, each one warmly greeted by Lucy and taken inside without hesitation. There were couples celebrating anniversaries, business people in fancy suits, and groups of friends out for lunch. All different, but all seeming to fit in perfectly, while Ava felt like she didn't belong. A young couple caught her eye. The woman was pregnant, maybe even more than Ava. They talked to Lucy, who instantly showed them inside, offering extra cushions and a special menu for expectant mothers. Ava felt a rush of anger. What made them different from her and Jake? Was it the color of their skin or the clothes they wore? As the minutes passed, Ava's discomfort grew. The bench was hard and the heat was too much. She shifted to find a better position, but it didn't help. A dull ache spread across her back, and she started to worry. Her doctor had warned her not to stress or overdo it. A group of laughing women walked out of the restaurant, wearing fancy sundresses and big sunglasses. One of them glanced at Ava, her smile fading for a moment before she quickly looked away and whispered something to her friends. Ava felt her cheeks burn. She was painfully aware of how she must look. sweaty, messy, and completely out of place in this fancy world. She rubbed her belly gently, trying to comfort herself and the baby. "It's okay," she whispered. "Daddy will be here soon and we'll figure this out." But as another half hour passed, Ava's faith faded. Where was Jake? This wasn't like him, especially today. Was something wrong? Had there been an accident or a work emergency? Just as she was thinking about asking someone for help, Lucy came out of the restaurant. For a moment, Ava felt a rush of faith. Maybe they had found the reservation after all. But Lucy walked right past her without even looking, heading straight for another guest. "Excuse me," Ava called out, her voice stronger than she felt. "I'm sorry to bother you again, but can you check on my reservation one more time? Or maybe let me use your phone to call my husband." Lucy turned to her, annoyance on her face. "Mrs. Thompson, as I said before, we have no reservation under your name. We're fully booked, and I can't let you use our phone for personal calls. Maybe you should find somewhere else to wait for your husband." The message was clear. Ava was not welcome here. It felt like a punch to the gut, leaving her breathless and fighting tears. "I understand," she whispered. "Thank you for your time." As Lucy walked away, Ava felt completely alone. The beautiful restaurant, the lovely surroundings, and the idea of a perfect anniversary celebration felt like a cruel joke. She was an outsider, unwanted in this world of luxury. With a heavy heart, Ava stood up. Her back hurt and she had to pause for a moment, steadying herself against the bench. Where would she go? How would she get home? And where was Jake? Just then, a sleek sports car pulled up to the valet stand. A well-dressed man got out, looking confident and smiling as if he belonged there. He saw Ava, his eyes widening when he noticed her pregnant belly and sad expression. For a brief moment, their eyes met, and she saw a flicker of concern on his face. But then he looked away, hurrying inside without a backward glance. The message was clear. Ava didn't belong here, and everyone could see it. Lucy appeared like magic, welcoming the man with a big smile. "Mr. Carter, how lovely to see you again. Your usual table is ready, and may I say that new Armani suit looks amazing on you." Ava watched as Mr. Carter was taken inside. Lucy laughed at something he said, her voice floating back to Ava. The difference in how they treated her compared to him made Ava feel a surge of anger through her sadness. Taking a deep breath, Ava squared her shoulders. With as much dignity as she could muster, she walked up to Lucy again. "Excuse me," she said, her voice steady even though she felt upset inside. "I would like to speak to your manager, please." Lucy's smile faded as she recognized Ava. "I'm afraid that won't be possible, Mrs. Thompson. Our manager is very busy, and as I said, we can't accommodate you without a reservation." "I understand," Ava replied, trying to stay calm, "but I believe I've been treated unfairly, and I would like to talk to someone in charge." Lucy's eyes narrowed slightly. "Mrs. Thompson, I've been very patient with you, but I must ask you to leave now. If you keep causing a disturbance, I will have to call security." Ava felt as if she had been slapped. "Cause a disturbance?" she repeated, her voice rising slightly. "All I've done is ask to be treated with basic respect and dignity. Is that too much to ask?" A few nearby guests looked at her, their faces showing curiosity and discomfort. Lucy's expression hardened. "Please lower your voice, Mrs. Thompson. You're making a scene." Ava laughed, though there was no humor in it. "You left a pregnant woman standing in the heat for over an hour, denied her basic courtesy, and implied that she doesn't meet your standards. And I'm the one making a scene?" Lucy glanced around nervously, clearly feeling the attention they were getting. "Mrs. Thompson, I'm warning you. Leave now or I will call security." Ava opened her mouth to respond, but suddenly a sharp pain shot through her stomach. She gasped and bent over slightly. Lucy's eyes widened in real concern. "Mrs. Thompson, are you all right?" she asked, her voice losing some of its edge. Ava straightened slowly, pressing her hand to her belly. "I'm fine," she said through gritted teeth. No thanks to you or this place." With that, Ava turned and started to walk away. She could feel Lucy's eyes on her back and sense the stares of other guests, but she kept her head held high, refusing to let them see how deeply their treatment had hurt her. As Ava reached the edge of the property, she paused and looked back at the beautiful stone building. Through the windows, she could see people laughing and enjoying their meals, celebrating happy moments in their lives. It was everything she and Jake had wanted for their anniversary, everything she had been denied. "I hope you're all proud of yourselves," she whispered, her voice shaking. "I hope you sleep well tonight, knowing how you treat people who don't fit your idea of who belongs." With those words, Ava turned away from the Hilltop Haven, away from her broken anniversary plans, and began the long, lonely walk down the winding country road. Her feet hurt and her back ached, but she kept going. One hand held her swollen belly, and the other clutched a small gift box, a bitter reminder of the celebration that wasn't meant to be. As Ava walked around the bend, the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the pretty lawns of the Hilltop Haven. Inside the restaurant, it buzzed with activity, and the guests were happily unaware of the hurt and unfairness that had happened just outside. Somewhere out there, Jake was still on his way, not knowing that his surprise had gone very wrong, and that his wife was walking alone on a quiet road, feeling more lonely and unwanted than she ever had before. When Ava had walked about a quarter-mile down the road, she suddenly realized her problem. The Hilltop Haven was exactly as its name suggested, far from any other places. Ava stopped and looked at the empty road ahead of her. There were no buildings or even a gas station in sight. "Oh God," she whispered, instinctively cradling her belly. "What am I going to do?" Just then, a sharp pain shot through her belly, making her bend over. Ava gasped and leaned against a nearby tree. Her doctor's warning echoed in her mind. "Ava, your pregnancy is high risk. You need to avoid standing or walking too much. It could cause problems." Tears of frustration and fear filled her eyes. She felt stuck between a rock and a hard place, unable to leave but unwelcome to stay. The car service Jake had arranged was long gone, and her phone was dead, so she couldn't call for help. Taking a deep breath, Ava straightened her shoulders and turned back towards the restaurant. Even though she didn't want to go back to a place that had treated her so badly, she knew she had no choice. Her baby's health had to come first. Inside the Hilltop Haven, Lucy, the head hostess, was telling the restaurant manager, Mark, about her encounter with Ava. Mark, who was in his late 40s with gray hair and a frown, listened with annoyance and indifference. "And then she had the nerve to ask to speak to you," Lucy finished, her voice full of disdain. "Can you believe it?" Mark sighed, running his hand through his thinning hair. "These people never understand that places like ours have standards to maintain. Did you make it clear that she wasn't welcome?" Lucy nodded quickly. "Oh, absolutely. I told her she'd have to wait outside. I even threatened to call security when she started to make a scene." Mark's frown deepened. "Good. The last thing we need is for our regulars to feel uncomfortable. Mr. Carter just arrived, and you know how much he values his privacy." Their conversation stopped when they heard the front door open. Both Mark and Lucy looked up, shocked to see Ava stumble back inside. Her face was pale and tired. "Excuse me," Ava said, her voice barely a whisper. "I hate to bother you again, but I really need help. Is there any way I could sit down? I'm not feeling well." Lucy was about to say something rude, but Mark raised a hand to stop her. He walked over to Ava, his face showing a fake concern that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Mrs. Thompson, right?" he asked, his tone polite but cold. "I understand you're having a hard day. While we sympathize with your situation, I'm afraid we can't accommodate guests without reservations. It's against our policy." Ava felt dizzy and swayed slightly, grabbing onto a nearby column to steady herself. "Please," she begged, her voice shaking. "I'm not asking to be served. I just need a place to sit down. My doctor said I shouldn't be on my feet for too long, and I'm starting to feel faint. Mark's face stayed hard. I'm sorry, but our seating is for paying customers only. Perhaps you could wait in your car. I don't have a car, Ava explained, fighting back tears. My husband arranged for a car service, and I was supposed to leave with him in his car. Please, I have nowhere else to go. For a moment, something like sympathy flickered in Mark's eyes. But then he looked at the well-dressed guests watching them with curious eyes, and his face hardened again. Mrs. Thompson, while I understand your problem, we have a business to run and an image to keep. I'm going to have to insist that you wait outside. Ava felt as if she had been slapped. An image to keep? She repeated, her voice rising. Is that more important than being kind to someone? More important than the health of a pregnant woman and her baby? Mark's jaw tightened. Mrs. Thompson, please lower your voice. You're disturbing our other guests. Good, Ava exclaimed, not caring about being polite anymore. Let them see how you treat people who don't fit your narrow idea of who belongs here. Everyone in the restaurant fell quiet as they turned to watch the fight. Ava could feel their stares, some curious, some disapproving, and a few even sympathetic, but no one came forward to help. Mark leaned in close, his voice low and threatening. Mrs. Thompson, this is your final warning. Leave now, or I will have to call the police and have you removed for trespassing. Ava opened her mouth to respond, but another wave of dizziness washed over her. The room started to spin, and she felt her knees buckle as she began to fall. She heard gasps from the crowd just before she hit the ground. Strong arms caught her. Ava looked up, expecting to see Mark or one of the other staff members. Instead, she found herself looking into the concerned face of a stranger. Are you okay, ma'am? He asked gently, helping her to a nearby bench. What's going on here? Ava nodded weakly, thankful for the support. Thank you, she murmured. I just need to sit down for a moment. The man turned to Mark, his expression angry. Why wasn't this woman offered a seat before? Mark stood tall, recognizing the man. Mr. Bennett, I apologize for the disturbance. This woman doesn't have a reservation, and we were just explaining our policies to her. Mr. Bennett's eyes narrowed. Your policies? Does the Hilltop Haven have a policy against being kind? Mark sputtered, caught off guard. Of course not, Mr. Bennett, but we have standards to keep. Mr. Bennett interrupted, his voice sharp. What standards are those exactly? Are they the kind that turn away a pregnant woman in trouble? Is it valuing looks over kindness? He turned to Ava and softened his voice. Ma'am, I'm really sorry for what happened here. Please let me offer you my table. I insist. Before Mark or Lucy could say anything, Mr. Bennett guided Ava to his private dining room, giving angry looks to any staff member who might try to stop them. As they entered the fancy room, Ava felt a wave of relief wash over her. She sank into a soft chair and closed her eyes for a moment, trying to calm down. Thank you, she said, looking at Mr. Bennett. You have no idea how much this means to me. Mr. Bennett waved away her thanks. It's the least I could do. I'm ashamed I didn't step in sooner. May I ask your name? Ava, she replied. Ava Thompson. I was supposed to meet my husband here for our anniversary. She trailed off, fighting back tears. Mr. Bennett's face showed more sympathy. I'm really sorry this happened to you. Please order whatever you'd like. It's on me. As a waiter hurried over, clearly eager to help, Ava felt a little faith. Maybe things would turn out okay after all. Meanwhile, outside the restaurant, a sleek black car pulled up to the valet stand. Jake Thompson stepped out, looking worried. He had been trying to call Ava for hours, but couldn't reach her. His important business meeting had been a disaster, with a client threatening to pull out of a major deal. Jake had been too busy to let his wife know he was running late. Now, as he hurried toward the entrance of Hilltop Haven, his heart raced. He had planned a special surprise for their anniversary for weeks, and the thought of Ava waiting alone, thinking he had forgotten her, made him feel sick. As Jake approached the door, he saw Mark and Lucy arguing near the hostess stand. He overheard bits of their conversation, something about a disturbance and an unwelcome guest. "Excuse me," Jake interrupted, his voice tight with worry. "I'm looking for my wife, Ava Thompson. We had a reservation today." Mark and Lucy exchanged a worried look that made Jake feel uneasy. There was guilt on their faces and something else, fear. "Mr. Thompson," Lucy said, clearing her throat, "I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. We didn't have any reservation under that name." "What do you mean, no reservation?" Jake asked, his voice rising. "I made it weeks ago. Where is my wife?" Mark stepped forward, trying to calm him down. "Sir, please calm down. There was a woman here earlier who claimed to have a reservation, but as we explained to her—" "Explain what?" Jake's face turned red. "Where is she now?" Before Mark could answer, Mr. Bennett came out of his private dining room, looking very angry. "You should be ashamed of yourselves," he shouted, pointing at Mark and Lucy. "The way you treated that poor woman is disgraceful. I've been coming to Hilltop Haven for years, but after today, I won't be back." Jake felt his heart stop. "What woman?" he asked in a whisper. "Please tell me what happened." Mr. Bennett turned to Jake, his expression softening as he saw how worried he was. "Are you Ava's husband?" Jake nodded, unable to speak. "She's inside," Mr. Bennett said gently. "But she's been through a lot. These people," he glared at Mark and Lucy, "left her standing outside in the heat for hours and wouldn't even let her wait inside or use the phone to call you." Jake felt angry. He turned to Mark and Lucy, his eyes burning with rage. "You did what?" Lucy took a step back, her earlier confidence fading in the face of Jake's anger. "Mr. Thompson, please understand we have certain standards here, and your wife, well, she didn't quite fit the image," Lucy stammered. Jake felt like he had been punched in the stomach. "The image you try to maintain?" he repeated in a low voice. "And what image is that? One of exclusivity, of prejudice, of cruelty?" Mark tried to intervene. "Now, Mr. Thompson, I'm sure we can come to some understanding. Maybe we could offer you and your wife a free meal to make up for any inconvenience." "Inconvenience?" Jake exploded. "You left my pregnant wife standing in the heat for hours. You refused her basic kindness, and you think a free meal will fix that?" He took a deep breath to calm himself. "I want to see my wife now." Mr. Bennett nodded and led Jake to the private dining room. As they walked, he told Jake what had happened. When they entered the room, Jake's heart clenched at the sight of Ava. She looked pale and tired, with red eyes from crying. But when she saw him, her face lit up with relief. "Jake!" she exclaimed, trying to stand up. Jake rushed to her side and hugged her gently. "Oh, Ava," he murmured, feeling emotional. "I'm so sorry I wasn't here. I should have protected you from this." Ava clung to him, finally letting herself cry. "I was so scared," she sobbed. "I didn't know where you were, and they wouldn't let me inside, and I started feeling faint." Jake held her close, whispering comforting words as he listened to Ava talk about her terrible experience. Anger towards the restaurant staff came back, and a determined look filled his eyes. He helped her back into her seat and turned to face the restaurant staff who had gathered at the entrance, looking curious and concerned. "I think it's time we clear a few things up," Jake said, his voice low but firm. He stood up straight, and suddenly the young man in a business suit seemed much more powerful. "My name is Jake Thompson," he announced, looking at all the staff, "and I am the new owner of this restaurant chain." Everyone gasped, and Lucy, who had been standing at the back, felt the color drain from her face. Mark, the manager, looked very surprised, like he had been hit by lightning. Jake had just bought this hotel and wanted to surprise his wife for their anniversary. Jake narrowed his eyes and pointed at Lucy. "You're the one who left my wife standing outside for hours, aren't you?" he said. Lucy opened and closed her mouth, but no words came out. She looked confused, like a fish trying to breathe on land. I didn't know," she finally said, stammering. "Mr. Thompson, if I had any idea." Jake interrupted her, his voice sharp. That she was my wife? That I own this place? Does that change how you should have treated her? Lucy's eyes searched the room for help but found none. No, sir, she whispered, her voice very soft. Jake nodded, his face serious. You're right. Everyone who comes through those doors deserves to be treated with respect and kindness. You judged my wife based on how she looked and what you thought about her. I can't overlook that. He took a deep breath and said, You're fired, Lucy. Please gather your things and leave. Lucy's face fell, but Jake had already turned to Mark. Mark, the manager looked small under Jake's gaze. Mark, Jake said, I'm disappointed. As a manager, you should uphold the values this hotel is built on. How could you let this happen, especially knowing my wife was involved? Mark swallowed hard. Mr. Thompson, I made a mistake. I should have handled it better. A mistake? Jake repeated, his voice rising. A mistake is burning a steak or mixing up an order. This was a failure of leadership and basic kindness. He shook his head, showing his disappointment. You won't be fired today, Mark, but there will be a full review of your actions and we will take the necessary steps. As Jake spoke, waiters rushed forward offering apologies in the best table. The sous chef promised to make anything Ava wanted free of charge. But Ava, who had been watching everything, raised her hand to stop them. That's very kind of you, but it's not necessary, she said softly, struggling to stand. Jake rushed to her side to help her. Ava looked at each staff member with a steady gaze. The time for special treatment is over, she continued. What happened today wasn't about me being the owner's wife. It was about how you treat all people. The Cinetic respect and kindness shouldn't just be for people with money or connections. They should be given to everyone. A hush fell over the room as her words sank in. Several staff members lowered their heads, feeling ashamed. Jake squeezed Ava's hand, proud of her. He turned back to the staff and said, My wife is right, and her words will be the foundation of the changes we're going to make, not just here, but across our entire chain. He paused to make sure everyone was listening. From now on, we will have new training programs focused on kindness and service. We will change our rules so no guest ever feels unwelcome or unworthy, no matter how they look or where they come from. Jake looked at everyone again. I want you to understand this. The measure of any business is not how we treat our best guests, but how we treat every single person who walks through our doors. That is the standard we will follow from now on. As he finished speaking, a slow clap started from a corner of the room. Mr. Bennett, who had been watching, stepped forward. Well said, Mr. Thompson. He nodded. If you need help to make these changes, I'd be happy to help. I have been in the hospitality industry for over 30 years and can offer valuable advice. Jake smiled and shook Mr. Bennett's hand. I'd be honored, sir. Thank you for stepping in when no one else would. You showed the leadership I expect from everyone here. As the two men shook hands, Ava felt very tired. She swayed a little, and Jake rushed to support her. Are you okay? He asked, worry on his face. Ava nodded, but her face was pale. I'm just tired, Jake. It's been a long day. Jake's expression softened. Of course, love. Let's get you home. He turned to the staff again. We're leaving now. When I come back tomorrow, I expect to see immediate changes in attitude and behavior. Is that understood? A chorus of, yes, sir, echoed through the room as Jake guided Ava toward the exit. She paused and turned back to the staff. I trust that next time I come here, I will be treated like any other guest, with respect and kindness. With those words, Jake and Ava left the Hilltop Haven, leaving behind a quiet staff and the promise of change in the air. Outside, the cool evening breeze felt nice after the emotional meeting. Ava leaned into Jake's embrace. I'm so sorry, Ava, Jake said, kissing her forehead. But this isn't how I wanted our anniversary to go. I wanted to surprise you with the news of buying this hotel chain while celebrating, not like this. Ava looked up at him, a small smile on her lips despite her tiredness. Well, it certainly wasn't boring, she joked. Jake laughed. No, I guess not. But I wanted today to be special for you, for us. Ava's expression softened. Jake, today was terrible in many ways. Yes. But watching you stand up for me and what's right, seeing you take action to make things better, that's the man I fell in love with. That's the father I want for our child. She placed a hand on her belly. Our baby will grow up in a world that isn't always kind, but they will have a father who fights to make it better. That's a pretty special anniversary gift, if you ask me. Jake's eyes filled with tears as he pulled Ava closer. I love you so much, he whispered. I love both of you. As they stood there, bathed in the warm glow of the setting sun, a car pulled up. The driver helped Ava into the car, and Jake paused, looking back at the hilltop haven. The beautiful stone building stood silent against the darkening sky, its windows still glowing with light. But now Jake saw not just beauty, but also the responsibility that came with it. He silently promised that the hilltop haven and every restaurant in his chain would be a place of kindness and respect, a place where everyone, no matter who they were, would feel welcome. As he got into the car beside Ava, holding her hand, Jake felt a renewed sense of purpose. Today had been a harsh wake-up call, but it was also a chance to make real, lasting changes. So where to now? Ava asked, breaking into his thoughts. I don't know about you, but I could really go for some pizza, Jake said with a smile. Ava's eyes lit up. Now that sounds like a perfect anniversary celebration to me. As the car pulled away from the hilltop haven, Jake and Ava left behind the memory of a tough day, but took with them the promise of a brighter future. A future where kindness and respect would be the true measure of success in business and life. As they drove into the twilight, hands intertwined and hearts full of love and faith, they knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. In the end, it wasn't the big gestures or fancy plans that mattered most. It was the simple acts of love, support, and the commitment to make the world a little better each day. That night, as Jake and Ava sat in their favorite pizza place, sharing a supreme pizza and laughing over ice cream sundaes, they realized this unconventional anniversary celebration was perfect in its own way. It was a testament to their love, resilience, and shared values. As Jake watched Ava, her face glowing with happiness despite the day's troubles, he felt grateful for the life they were building together. Jake knew he had given Ava the best anniversary gift ever, the promise of a better tomorrow for them and their unborn baby, as well as for everyone whose lives they touched. The warm glow of the pizzeria's neon sign lit up Jake and Ava's faces as they stepped outside into the cool night air. Ava placed her hand gently on her round belly, smiling happily. They had enjoyed a simple dinner of pizza and ice cream, which was very different from the fancy anniversary celebration Jake had originally planned, but somehow it felt more meaningful and real. As they walked to their car, Jake's phone buzzed in his pocket. He glanced at the screen, frowning slightly. Everything okay? Ava asked, noticing his change in mood. Jake nodded, but his eyes looked worried. It's from the corporate office. They've been checking the records from Hilltop Haven, and it seems there's more to Mark's story than we thought. Ava squeezed his hand, encouraging him. Tell me. Jake took a deep breath, speaking quickly. Apparently, this isn't the first time something like this has happened. They found a pattern of complaints against Mark. People have been treated badly because they didn't fit his idea of what a proper Hilltop Haven guest should be like. Ava's eyes widened. How did no one notice before? That's the thing, Jake said, his voice tight with frustration. Mark was careful. He always had excuses, like fully booked nights or dress code violations. He picked on people he thought wouldn't fight back. When they reached the car, they didn't get in right away. The heavy news hung between them. What are you going to do? Ava asked softly. Jake ran a hand through his hair, looking determined. What I should have done this afternoon. Mark's fired, effective immediately. I'll call him first thing in the morning. Ava nodded, a mix of sadness and determination in her eyes. It's the right thing to do, Jake. What happened to me can't happen to anyone else. As they drove home, the city lights blurred past their windows. Jake felt uneasy. Hilltop Haven had always seemed fancy and exclusive, but at what cost? How many people had been hurt to keep up that image? The next morning was bright and clear, which felt strange to Jake. He sat at the kitchen table, phone in hand, preparing for the tough conversation ahead. Ava came in wearing her robe, wrapping her arms around her pregnant belly. She placed a comforting hand on Jake's shoulder. "You've got this," she said, kissing his cheek. Jake nodded, took a deep breath, and dialed the number. The conversation with Mark was short but intense. At first, Mark tried to defend himself, but as Jake shared the evidence and complaints, Mark's excuses fell apart. Jake's voice was firm. "You used your position to discriminate and exclude. That ends now. You're fired, effective immediately." There was a long pause, then Mark spoke softly. "I understand. I'm sorry for everything." After hanging up, Jake felt a weight lift off his shoulders. It was a small step, but an important one. Hilltop Haven would no longer allow such behavior. In the following weeks, Jake worked hard to change Hilltop Haven. He teamed up with Mr. Bennett, who had many years of experience in hospitality. Together, they created a new vision for the restaurant that focused on welcoming everyone, no matter who they were. They made big and small changes. The dress code was relaxed, focusing on cleanliness and appropriateness rather than fancy clothes. They also expanded the menu to include a variety of foods and prices, making it accessible for everyone without losing quality. The most important change was training the staff. Jake brought in experts on diversity and inclusion to lead workshops for all employees. The message was clear. Every guest, no matter their background, should be treated with respect and kindness. As Ava got closer to her due date, she spent more time at home, needing to rest. But she still stayed interested in the changes at Hilltop Haven and often shared her ideas based on her experiences. One evening, after a long day at the restaurant, Jake found Ava sitting in the nursery, hands on her belly and a thoughtful look on her face. "What are you thinking about?" Jake asked softly, leaning against the door frame. Ava smiled and said, "I was thinking about our baby and the world they will be born into." Jake knelt beside her chair. "What were you thinking?" "I was thinking how lucky they are," Ava replied, taking his hand and placing it on her belly. "They have a father who stands up for what's right and works to make the world better." Jake felt a lump in his throat. "We'll both do that, Ava, together." Just then, they felt a strong kick under their joined hands and laughed, the joy washing away the seriousness of their talk. As the weeks went by, the changes at Hilltop Haven started to show results. At first, some regular customers didn't like the new relaxed atmosphere. But for every complaint, many new guests felt welcomed for the first time. One evening, about a month after the incident with Ava, Jake was making his rounds in the restaurant when he overheard a conversation that made him pause. "I can't believe we're actually eating here," a woman said, her voice filled with wonder. "I always thought this place was off limits to people like us." Jake looked over and saw a young couple at a corner table. They were dressed simply but neatly, looking a little out of place in the fancy restaurant, but their faces lit up with excitement as they looked at the menu. "Can I help you with anything?" Jake asked, approaching their table with a warm smile. The couple looked startled. "Oh no, we're fine," the man said quickly. "Just taking it all in. We've never been anywhere this fancy before." Jake smiled wider. "I hope you enjoy your evening, and if you need anything, just ask. We're glad to have you here." As he walked away, Jake felt proud. This was what Hilltop Haven should be, a place where everyone could feel special, no matter their background. But just when things seemed to be settling into a new positive rhythm, life threw Jake and Ava another surprise. It was a quiet Tuesday evening, and Jake was at the restaurant overseeing dinner service. Ava was home, resting since her due date was still a few weeks away, or so they thought. When Jake's phone rang, his heart skipped a beat when he saw Ava's name on the screen. "Is everything okay?" he asked. Her voice came through a mix of excitement and worry. "Jake, I think it's time. My water just broke." For a moment, Jake felt like the world had tilted. Then he remembered what to do, both from the childbirth classes they attended and from his business training. Stay calm, assess the situation, take action. "Okay, honey, I'm on my way. Have you called the doctor?" "Yes," she said. "She said to head to the hospital." "Jake, I'm scared. It's too early." Jake was already moving, signaling Mr. Bennett to take over as he headed for the exit. "It's going to be okay, Ava. I'll be there in 10 minutes. Just breathe and remember what we learned in class. I love you." The drive home was a blur, with traffic lights and stop signs barely registering as Jake's mind raced. When he arrived home, he found Ava in the bedroom, her hospital bag already packed. She looked a little pale but was determined. "Let's go have a baby," she said, managing a smile despite her discomfort. The next few hours were very busy at the hospital. There were many nurses and doctors rushing around. Through it all, Jake stayed by Ava's side, holding her hand, keep wiping her forehead, and saying encouraging words. As the night went on and Ava's labor got stronger, Jake thought about how they got to this moment. He remembered the years he spent building his business, the unexpected purchase of the Hilltop restaurant, and a painful event that opened his eyes to the need for change. Ava had always been his rock, guiding him and supporting him in everything. Finally, in the early morning hours, with one last big push from Ava, their baby came into the world. The room filled with the sound of a loud cry, and Jake felt a love he had never felt before. "It's a girl," the doctor announced, placing the squirming red-faced baby on Ava's chest. Ava looked up at Jake with tears in her eyes and whispered, "She's perfect." Jake nodded, unable to speak because he was so emotional. He gently stroked his daughter's cheek, amazed by how soft her skin was and how tiny her features were. "What should we name her?" Ava asked, her voice thick with feelings. Jake thought for a moment and then smiled. "How about Faith? Because that's what she represents, faith for a better future where she will be judged by who she is, not by the color of her skin or how much money we have." Ava nodded, her eyes shining. "Oh, it's perfect." As the sun rose over the city, filling the hospital room with soft, golden light, Jake held his newborn daughter in his arms while Ava rested peacefully beside them. In that moment, he made a silent promise to his child, to Ava, and to himself. He would keep working hard to create a world where Faith and all children like her could grow up feeling valued, respected, and welcome everywhere they went. News of Faith's birth spread quickly, and soon their hospital room was filled with flowers, balloons, and well wishes from friends, family, and even the staff at the Hilltop restaurant. Mr. Bennett, the owner, even stopped by. His tough exterior softened when he saw the tiny baby. "She's a beauty," he said, gently touching Faith's little hand. "You two should be proud." As the days passed and Ava and Faith grew stronger, Jake found himself juggling his work at the restaurant and his new job as a dad. It was tiring but exciting, and he wouldn't want it any other way. One evening, about a month after Faith was born, Jake and Ava decided it was time to introduce their daughter to the Hilltop restaurant. They dressed her in a cute little outfit and headed to the restaurant, feeling both excited and nervous about how everyone would react. As they walked through the doors, Jake noticed how different the place felt compared to the day months ago when Ava had been turned away. The new hostess, a young woman named Rachel, greeted them with a warm smile. "Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, and this must be little Faith. Welcome." As Rachel led them to their table, Jake saw the important changes that had happened. The customers were more diverse and the dress code was more relaxed. But more than that, there was a feeling of warmth in the air, a real sense of welcome that went beyond just being polite. They settled into their booth, Faith sleeping peacefully in her carrier while they looked over the menu, which now had many different foods and prices. Ava reached across the table to hold Jake's hand. "You've done well, Mr. Thompson," she said softly. "This place feels like somewhere anyone could belong." Jake smiled, his heart full. "We did well," he corrected gently. "I couldn't have done any of this without you." As they enjoyed their meal, sometimes stopping to coo over Faith or accept congratulations from the staff and other diners, Jake thought about how far they had come. The pain and humiliation Ava had felt that day months ago had sparked real change, not just for the Hilltop restaurant, but for Jake himself. He thought about Mark, the old manager whose unfair ideas had caused so much trouble. After firing Mark, Jake had heard that Mark took time to think about his past mistakes. The last he knew, Mark was volunteering at a community center, trying to make up for what he had done. It wasn't a perfect ending, but it was a step in the right direction. Then there was Lucy, the hostess who had been so unkind to Ava. Jake got a letter from her a few weeks after she was let go. In it, she said she was very sorry for her actions and thanked Jake for helping her see her own biases. She was now working at a small family restaurant, learning the true meaning of being kind and welcoming. Just then, a loud noise interrupted Jake's thoughts. He looked up to see a group of people being turned away by Rachel, the hostess. His heart sank, worried that old habits were coming back despite their efforts. But as he watched, he saw Rachel smiling apologetically and pointing toward the busy dining room. "I'm so sorry," he heard her say. "We're fully booked tonight. Can I take your names for our waiting list? Or maybe I can suggest some other great restaurants nearby?" The group, which included people of all ages and backgrounds, nodded and smiled. One older woman patted Rachel's hand and said, "No worries, dear. We'll try again another night. It's so nice to see this place so busy and welcoming to everyone." Jake felt proud. This was what he had been working for, a place where everyone truly felt welcome, where the only limit was how many people could fit inside. As the evening continued and Faith began to fuss, Jake and Ava prepared to leave. As they made their way to the door, many staff members and even a few regular customers stopped to admire the baby and congratulate them. Just as they reached the exit, an elderly couple entered. The woman, who was leaning heavily on a cane, looked around in surprise. "Oh my," she said to her husband. "Remember when we used to come here, George? It's so different now." Jake paused, wanting to hear more. The man, George, nodded. "It sure is, Ethel, but look how lively it is, and there are so many different people here." Ethel smiled, her eyes sparkling. "It feels warmer somehow, more welcoming." As Jake held the door open for the couple, he felt proud. This was the true measure of success, not in money, but in the smiles of people who finally felt welcome in a place that had once felt out of reach. That night, as Jake and Ava put Faith to bed in her nursery, they stood for a moment, arms around each other, watching their daughter sleep. "You know," Ava said softly, "when I was standing outside the Hilltop restaurant that day, feeling so alone and unwelcome, I never could have imagined we'd end up here." Jake hugged Ava tightly and kissed her on the forehead. "I'm so sorry you had to go through that, Ava, but in a way, I'm grateful it opened my eyes to things I should have noticed before." Ava nodded, gently stroking Faith's cheek. "Now our daughter will grow up in a world that's a little bit better and a little bit kinder." As they stood in the quiet nursery with Faith sleeping peacefully in her crib, Jake felt a strong sense of purpose. The changes they had made at Hilltop Haven were just the beginning. There was still so much work to do, many minds to open, and hearts to change. But looking at his wife and daughter, Jake knew that every effort and struggle was worth it. They were creating a legacy of kindness and inclusivity that would spread far beyond the walls of their restaurant. As the months went by, Hilltop Haven became known not just for its great food, but also for its warm and welcoming atmosphere. The changes Jake and his team made began to influence other restaurants, and even their competitors started to notice. 1 year after the incident that changed everything, Jake and Ava decided to host a special event at Hilltop Haven. They invited a diverse group of people, regular customers, community leaders, and even some who had been turned away before. The restaurant was full of energy as Jake stood up to speak. Faith, now a cheerful 1-year-old, babbled happily in Ava's arms. "A year ago," Jake said, his voice filling the quiet room, "this restaurant was a very different place. It was exclusive, but at a terrible cost. We had lost sight of what really matters in hospitality, making everyone feel welcome and valued." He paused and looked at Ava, who smiled encouragingly. He continued, "Thanks to my wife, Ava, whose strength and dignity in the face of discrimination opened my eyes, we've been on a journey of change. It hasn't always been easy, but it has always been right." Jake looked around at the diverse faces in the room. "Look around you. This is what Hilltop Haven was always meant to be. A place where everyone, no matter their background, can come together to enjoy good food and good company." As applause filled the room, Jake felt a tug on his pants. He looked down to see Faith, who had walked over from Ava's arms. With a smile, he scooped her up and held her high for everyone to see. "This is my daughter, Faith," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "She represents the future we are all working towards, a future where no one is judged by their skin color, how much money they have, or any other silly reason. A future where kindness and inclusivity are normal, not rare." As the event came to an end, Jake and Ava stood by the door, thanking their guests as they left. The last to leave was Mr. Bennett, who had become a close friend and mentor over the past year. "You've done a great job, kids," he said, his gruff voice softening with pride. "You've turned this place into something special." After he left, Ava leaned into Jake's side. "We did it," she said softly. Jake nodded and pulled her close. "We did, but it's just the beginning." As they stood there, the warm lights of Hilltop Haven glowing behind them and Faith sleeping peacefully in her stroller, they knew they hadn't just changed a restaurant. They had started a movement. One small act of kindness at a time, Hilltop Haven stood as a symbol of what was possible when people chose inclusivity over exclusivity and kindness over judgment. It had become more than just a restaurant. It had become a home for its staff, customers, and the community it served. As Jake and Ava walked to their car holding hands, they knew that whatever challenges the future held, they would face them together. They would keep working every day to make the world a little better and kinder for Faith and all the children who would inherit the world they were building. Their story is a reminder that standing up against unfairness can really make a difference, and that kindness and respect should always be at the heart of every interaction. What would you have done in Ava and Jake's situation? Have you ever faced a moment where you had to stand up for what's right? Let us know in the comments below. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Piece of Fiction for more inspiring and heartwarming stories of courage, compassion, and unexpected twists. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.